David was just a normal man who lived in a small town where nothing big ever happened, and every day looked the same as the one before it, with gray skies above and cold wind below. He walked to work at the warehouse with his head down and his hands deep in his jacket pockets. He did not talk much, and nobody ever noticed him, not even when he came in late or left early. His life was simple and quiet like a flat line on a broken screen. He had no friends who called him, no family who missed him, and no dreams that kept him awake at night. The world did not care about him, and maybe he did not care about it either. He just went on and on without a reason, without a voice, without a mark. David worked with boxes and machines and loud alarms in a warehouse that smelled of dust and oil. He would move heavy crates from one side to the other and stack them high like towers of forgotten things. No one ever thanked him, no one ever asked if he was okay, and no one ever saw the small burn on his wrist, or the way he counted steps under his breath like a quiet song of control. But something strange was coming, something from the stars, something that did not care about cities or names or rules. It was above all that, flying fast and low across the night sky with a body like a shadow, and eyes like fire. It watched and listened, and then it chose. That night the sky was too quiet, and the air felt too still, like the whole world was holding its breath. David walked home the long way through the dark street that smelled of rain and old wires. When he saw a light in the sky that blinked once and vanished, he stopped, but nothing moved around him. Not a car, not a leaf, not even the wind. Suddenly his body froze, not because he wanted to stop, but because he could not move his legs, his arms, his neck. Everything locked like a machine without power. He tried to scream, but his voice was trapped in his throat like a stone. A beam of white light came down from nowhere. It wrapped around him soft and cold like ice, and then everything disappeared. The street, the lights, the cold, even his fear, all gone in a blink. David opened his eyes, but he was not on earth anymore. The floor beneath him was smooth and black like glass. The walls were silver and full of symbols that glowed and shifted like living things. He was not alone, but he felt alone. He saw other humans, some crying, some shaking, and some already asleep in strange chairs that looked alive. Strange beings moved around them, tall and thin, with arms like ropes and heads that pulsed with blue veins. They spoke in a sound that hurt his ears like metal screaming in water. They did not look angry. They looked bored, like this was just another day at work, just another job. One of them came near with a tool in its hand like a scanner, or maybe a knife. David did not know. But he did not fight. He just stared. He watched. He memorized the way the tool hummed, the way the creature blinked, the way the door opened and closed with a soft click each time. They strapped him to a table with lines of light that moved like snakes. He felt his arms pull back his chest, lift his legs, fall still again. He could not move again. He could not scream again. He waited. Inside his mind, something woke up, something. He had forgotten, something old and cold and sharp like the lessons his father once gave him in the woods, the lessons he thought were useless, the drills, the traps, the pain, the silence. His father used to say, one day someone might come and take you away, and if they do, you fight with your mind first, then your hands. David looked at the ceiling above him. He saw a small vent no bigger than a hand open and closed every few seconds and made no noise. He saw a panel near the door with flashing lights that matched the steps of the creatures. He saw the way one of the straps on his left wrist was loose, just a little loose, but maybe enough. He was not scared, not really, not anymore. He was learning. He was watching, and something inside was growing, not loud, not big, but steady like a fire in dry grass, quiet and hungry and patient. The creatures did not see it. They only saw a human, a weak man, who did not talk, who did not fight, who did not matter. But they missed what was inside, the thing they did not scan, the thing they did not know how to find. David was just a man yesterday, but today he was something else, not because he changed, but because they made the first mistake. They took the wrong person. They took the one man no one saw coming. And now they were going to learn that the invisible ones are the ones you should fear the most. David lay still on the cold table with light ropes holding him down while the tall alien moved away without looking back. And without care the others moved around the room, pressing buttons, touching panels, watching numbers float in the air like smoke. He looked calm, but inside his mind was moving fast like fire chasing wind. The loose strap on his wrist was his only hope, and he knew he had to wait for the right moment. The aliens had a rhythm, a pattern like a song. He could hear in the clicks of their steps and the blinking of the lights and the way the door opened and closed like breathing. He counted each sound, each second, each movement, and built a plan inside his head. He pulled his wrist slowly, feeling the soften of the light rope fight back. But it gave a little more with each breath, a little more with each heartbeat, until finally his hand slipped free. He kept it close to his side, not moving, not shaking. He did not want them to see, not yet. One of the aliens turned and walked past him, holding a strange tool like a fork made of glowing wires. It paused for a second and looked down at David. but only scan his chest, then turn away again, bored again, blind. That was his moment. He reached up and tapped the panel near his waist that made no sound, but it opened the strap on his other wrist and the ones on his legs. He rolled off the table slow and quiet, like a shadow, like smoke on water. His bare feet touched the cold floor, and he froze for a second, but no one noticed. The room was full of soft lights and moving walls, strange machines that pulsed like hearts, and doors that melted open and closed without touch. He moved between the machines, using them as cover, crawling low and breathing slow. He saw a vent near the far wall. The same one he had seen from the table. Was open, but too small to walk through. He needed a way to open it wide. He found a tool on the floor dropped by a careless alien, something like a wrench with lights on its edges. He did not know what it was, but he felt the weight that gripped the way it hummed in his hand, like it wanted to be used. He crawled to the vent and jammed it into the side, twisting hard until the vent groaned and widened just enough for him to slip inside. The tunnel was narrow and dark with wires and dust and old sounds like whispers from the ship's bones. He crawled through it fast but quiet, stopping at each corner to listen for voices or steps or breathing. The ship was alive, and it felt like it knew he was there, but it was too big, too busy, too full of noise to focus on one small escape. He passed over rooms full of strange creatures in tanks, some sleeping, some screaming. He passed labs with humans strapped to chairs, their eyes wide, their minds broken, and he wanted to help them, but he could not yet. He had to survive first. He had to make out. He had to become the ghost they would fear. He found another vent and pushed it open, falling into a storage room full of strange weapons and armor racks of gear from other planets, glowing or pulsing, or moving on their own. He grabbed a simple piece of armor, like a vest, and a small blade that buzzed when he held it, felt right in his hand, like it belonged there. Suddenly the door hissed open, and two aliens stepped inside, talking in their sharp voice, clicking and humming. They did not see him at first, but the moment their eyes met as he moved, he threw the blade, and it spun fast, slicing into the taller one's chest. With a flash of blue light, it screamed, and felt the second alien reach for a weapon. But David was already there, grabbing its arm and twisting until something cracked. The creature dropped and stopped moving. He took their gear, a small scanner, and a key device that seemed to open every door. He pointed at the wall, and a map blinked into the air, showing the path through the ship, showing where he was, and where the hangars were. He had a goal now. He had a path. He had the tools. He moved fast through the halls, quiet and deadly, like a shadow that learned how to strike. He used the scanner to avoid patrols, the key to open locked doors, and the vents to pass unseen. He was not running anymore. He was hunting. He was learning the ship better than its makers, and he was planning more than escape. By the time the alarm screamed across the ship, it was too late for them. He was already gone from their sensors, already deep into the metal veins of the giant ship, already becoming the one thing they could not catch or stop or erase. They had taken a man who lived in silence and made him into something loud, without sound, into a threat, that moved like fear, into a ghost who remembered every pain, every step, every name. David was not special before, but now he was something else, something they had made with their own hands. And now they would pay with everything they had. The ship floated in the black sea of stars, broken in silence, but alive with movement as lights flickered across its long metal skin. Inside, the crew searched every hallway, every corner, every room, hoping to find a human they had lost. But David was no longer just a man hiding. He was a spirit moving through their walls, like a whisper, like a warning. In a lower deck near the core of the ship, David watched them from behind a cracked panel, listening to their commands, learning their fear. He could hear in the rush of their feet, in the panic of their orders and the way. They looked over their shoulders like prey in the wild. He knew he had done more than escape. He had become something they did not understand. He moved again, fast and low, staying close to the heat lines of the engine walls where scanners failed and shadows lived. He reached the heart of the ship, a glowing chamber of energy pulsing like a living star with tubes and wires spinning around it like a web of veins. He knew it was a main power source, and he knew what he had to do. Using the alien key device, he unlocked the service panel and crawled into the narrow crawl space filled with light and static. He felt the buzz in his teeth and the heat on his skin, but he kept moving deeper into the heart until he reached the core link, a glowing rod floating in energy streams. He had seen something like it before in a survival manual about reactors. He remembered the warning: touch the core and the ship dies. He took a small alien tool from a stolen vest, something like a screwdriver, but sharper, brighter, more alive. He inserted it into the base of the core link and twisted slow, and steady. The lights around him turned red. The hum of the room began to rise, and the walls shook like thunder, trying to wake something old. Before the alarm could scream, David was gone again, crawling back into the tunnels, leaving only sparks behind the ship, now bled red light and fear, and the aliens ran like ants under fire, calling for order for control, but it was too late. He made his way to the upper bay where the smaller ship slept under guards and shields. He waited above them, watching patrols, watching their routine, waiting for the one gap, the one breath of silence in their noise. And when it came, he dropped down like a shadow made of blades. 2 guards fell before they even turned their heads, and the third tried to scream, but David hit him with the butt of his stolen weapon silent, and swift the body dropped without a sound. And David moved to the control pad using the alien key, once more unlocking the bay door, just enough for one ship to slip through. The vessel he chose was small and fast, with design like a bird of prey, smooth wings, and no windows, only screens inside. He sat at the controls and guessed at the symbols, remembering the ones he had seen before in the lab and the halls and the scanners around the ship. He pressed them in a sequence, and the engines whispered to life, ready to fly, ready to run. As he lifted off the floor of the bay, the door behind him exploded open, and dozens of aliens rushed in firing beams of light and screaming their sharp voices. But the ship shot forward like a bolt from a bow, dodging the blast, twisting to the narrow hangar, and out into the stars. David turned the ship back for a second, just 1 second, and fired the rear cannon. At the weak point he had created deep inside the core, the beam hit the right spot, and the ship behind him began to crack and burn from within a chain of light, tearing through it like fire through dry leaves. He flew fast away from the wreckage, not looking back, not slowing down as pieces of the alien vessel floated in the void, like dead memories, like warning for those who would try again. In the silence of space, David sat alone, eyes on the stars, hands steady, heart calm. He was not afraid, not lost, not broken. He was made in fire and silence, shaped by fear and pain, and now he was free not just in body but in purpose. Somewhere in the ship he left behind, the aliens were trying to speak, try to record, trying to warn others, but their systems were broken, their messages incomplete and scattered, and by the time anyone found them, the story would be old and forgotten. David had no planet to return and no command to follow, no war to fight. But he had a mission now of fire that would not go out. He would find others like him, others taken, others forgotten. And he would teach the stars that humans were not prey, not toys, not mistakes. They had made their first mistake by thinking he was weak, and now he would become the last mistake they ever made. The stars whispered as David moved through them like a ghost in steel, carried by a ship not meant for him, yet shaped by his hands. Each button pressed, each lever pulled like a memory, like instinct built from survival. He traveled through unknown paths, following signals long forgotten, searching for the next clue, the next truth. He slept in short dreams where the screams of the past echoed loud and clear, and when he woke, the silence of space wrapped around him like a heavy coat, reminding him that he was still alone, still hunted, still human. One day, while tracking a broken transmission, he found something hidden behind a dying moon, a station twisted and dark, without lights, without life, but still breathing with energy, as if waiting for someone waiting for him. The ship landed with a hiss of steam, and David stepped out slowly, weapon-ready, eyes sharp. The hallway welcomed him like an old friend, rusted walls covered in strange writing, blinking lights beneath cracked panels. He walked forward, one step at a time, boots echoing on the metal floor like war drums in an empty land. He reached a large room filled with tanks, filled with blue fluid, and inside floated bodies, not alien, not machine, but human, like them asleep or dead. He did not know until one move, eyes opening slow, filled with confusion, then fear, then calm. David tapped the glass gently, and the figure inside placed a hand where his was, as if understanding passed between them, as if stories shared without sound could still be heard. He moved to the control panel, wiped away the dust, and touched the screen, watching symbols shift until words appeared in broken Earth language: survivor, stasis, fail, rescue, unknown, purpose forgotten. He pressed the release button, and the tank drained slowly as the chamber opened, and the human inside fell forward, coughing, gasping, alive. The man looked at David, eyes wide as if seeing a ghost, then smiled weakly and whispered, "You came," and David nodded, not knowing what else to say, not needing to say anything more. Together they moved through the station, waking others, unlocking tanks, opening doors. With each soul freed, the silence broke, and the station came alive. Lights blinked brighter, machines hummed louder, voices echoed through the halls like a choir of hope rising from deep sleep. They found weapons old but usable and food sealed tight. But still good they found maps of systems marked in red, places lost to time, and war places where others may still sleep, where others may still fight. David stood before them, a man once alone, now a leader, not by choice but by fire. They followed him not because he asked, but because he had survived, because he had returned, because he had become a story they all wanted to believe in. They trained in empty halls, fought simulations, battled against fear and memory each day, growing stronger, more united, more dangerous. And David watched it all, quietly speaking, only when needed, acting always with purpose, his eyes never blinking from the stars beyond. One night, while they rested, a signal reached them, clear and strong, a cry for help from a nearby system, the voice shaky. But real, saying, "They are here. They found us. We cannot hold much longer." And then silence. David stood from his seat, walked to the center of the command deck, and looked at the faces around him. Not one looked away, not one stepped back. They waited for his word, his choice. And he only said 3 words: "We go now." The ships they prepared were fast and armed with what they had rebuilt. Engines roared, shields held, and hearts burned. They flew in formation, like wolves across the black, hunting, together ready to strike. When they reached the system, the battle had already begun. Alien ships circled a small colony, firing beams, tearing through shields. David did not hesitate, gave orders clear, and sharp their ships dove into the fight, firing back, drawing enemy fire away from the surface. The humans below saw the sky change, saw lights dance, saw ships fall and rise, and then they saw something more. They saw one ship fly straight into the enemy formation, breaking them apart, scattering them like dust, and from that ship came the signal: "This is David, you are not alone." The tide turned fast, the aliens broke and ran, and the humans stood on the ground, eyes wide, mouths open, as their sky burned bright with victory. When it ended, David landed, walked out, covered in ash and metal, and silence followed him, every eye on him, every voice caught in throat. A child stepped forward, small and shaking, holding a broken toy, and asked, "Are you real?" And David knelt down, smiled, and said, "More real than your fear." From that day his name spread like fire across the stars, whispered in halls, sung in hidden bases, carved into walls of old ships. They called him the Reckoning, the Flame, the Human Ghost. He did not seek titles, did not want praise, but he carried their hopes, now carried their rage, there will their fire. And the stars would never forget the day they saw what a human could truly become. The stars were no longer silent. They spoke now in echoes and whispers and distant pulses and flickering lights, carrying the weight of legends across galaxies. Some called it myth, others called it warning, but every corner of space knew the name David, and the spark he had lit among the broken and beaten. He moved now through deeper space into regions that maps once feared to mark a zone wrapped in darkness, where signals went to die and ships vanished like dust and wind, a place the old empires had abandoned and the new ones dared not claim. With him flew those who believed, who felt the fire of loss and the grip of rage men, and women once broken, now rebuilt by purpose. They were not soldiers by birth, but by pain and by choice, and they followed David into the dark, without question, without pause. Their ships moved in silence, sleek and black like shadows, with engines tuned to hum like whispers, radar, invisible weapons ready, but still hidden. They were not hunting for glory. They were searching for the source, the first wrong, the origin of the alien chains that had bound Earth and others like it. David sat in the lead ship, his eyes fixed on the void ahead, and his thoughts drifting between past and future. He remembered the caves, the fire, the escape, the loneliness, then the faces of those he had saved, those who now stood beside him, not as followers, but as family forged in the same furnace. Suddenly the silence broke. A pulse ran through their systems, faint, but not random, a signal old and cracked, but laced with something more than just data. It carried emotion, fear, sorrow, urgency, and beneath it a code, ancient Earth code, military black, tear a ghost in the past, reaching out from the edge of space. He ordered the fleet to follow the trail, and they moved like wolves on scent, deeper into void, through asteroid belts and collapsed wormholes, through fields of debris and forgotten battleships, rusted bones of forgotten wars, until they saw it. A station hanging like a corpse near a dead sun, massive in size, covered in strange markings, half human, half alien, a fusion of pain and science, surrounded by broken ships, human ships chained like prisoners, some still with power flickering through their frames. David gave the order to hold position, and took a small team aboard his own craft. They approached the station with weapons drawn, hearts pounding, as the docking clamps locked with a sound like thunder. Inside, the air was cold and heavy, the walls pulsed with strange light veins of glowing metal that seemed alive, the hallways twisted like mazes, and the floor whispered with each step, not with sound, but with feeling, as if the station itself was watching, waiting, remembering. They found the source of the signal, a room filled with pods, some open, some shattered, and one still sealed with frost. A man inside, old and thin, wrapped in wires and tubes, face pale, but peaceful, eyes closed in deep sleep. David activated the console, and the pod hissed. Open. A man fell forward, gasping, coughing, and then looked up at David with eyes that knew too much and lips that spoke a single name: Project Lazarus. The room fell silent as the man spoke of old war secret missions, bioweapons, and a plan to create the perfect survivor, not a hero, but a virus of resistance, someone who could survive anything, adapt to everything, someone who could ignite rebellion with presence alone. They had made him long ago, but he had escaped before they could finish, before they could control. And when the aliens came, they buried the project to protect their secrets. David listened without blinking, not surprised, not angry, but calm as if the truth had simply confirmed something he already knew, something he had always felt in his bones. The man warned him the creators would come soon, the real architects of control. Not the alien armies, but the ones who had shaped both sides of hand behind the war, the minds behind the chains. David turned to his team, gave the order to download everything, to copy every file, every secret, and then set charges around the core of the station. He would not let this place stand, not while held the keys to the suffering of billions. As they escaped, the station shook with fire and fury, pieces falling into the dead sun, while behind them sensors lit up with warning, ships coming through dark space, silent and fast, larger than any seen before, with technology that bent light and space, with minds that reached into ships and whispered into dreams. But David did not run. He stood at the center of the command deck, watching as the first ship appeared, eyes locked, hands steady. He gave the order to prepare every weapon, to raise every shield, to fight not just for Earth, but for truth, for every species crushed by the same hand. The void roared, and the humans roared back, not with fear, but with fury, not with despair, but with fire, and in the center of it all stood the one who was never meant to be special, the one they had made by mistake. The sky around them was not black, it was alive, filled with movement and pressure and heat, like something ancient breathing. Between stars, something older than any war, older than memory itself. David stood firm on the deck of the ship, eyes fixed on the screen ahead, where the enemy began to arrive. Not just ships, but shapes that twisted light in space, bending reality with each step into the system. They moved without engines, without sound, sliding across the void like thoughts made metal. His crew watched with silent fear, but also with something stronger, the kind of strength that only comes from pain, from knowing loss, from surviving when others had fallen. They looked to David not for orders, but for certainty, and he gave it to them with a single nod. They activated the shields and weapon systems, lighting up their ships like beasts ready for the hunt. Energy pulsed through the engines, and power hummed through the corridors, but still no one moved to fire, not yet, not until the enemy made its first mistake. A voice entered the ship, not through speakers, but inside their minds, deep and low like thunder underwater. It spoke, not in words, but in meaning, offering peace, offering surrender, offering illusions of comfort and rest and forgetting. David stepped forward and answered, not with words, but with memory, with images of burning cities, broken homes, dead eyes of children crushed under alien boots. The voice recoiled, and the enemy ships paused like animals that had felt pain for first time. Then the battle began. Light and fire erupted between them. Lasers cut across the dark space. Missiles screamed. Without sound, plasma bolts danced like lightning storms between the ships, each side pushing forward, each refusing to fall back. David moved with focus, commanding with eyes and hands, leading not from behind, but from the heart of the fire. His ship dodged and struck, twisted, and turned, diving through explosions like a hawk in storm. His team fought with the fury of those who had nothing left to lose and everything still to fight, for each one moving not just for Earth, but for the truth, for the billions that never had a voice. Then came the breach. One of the alien ships, too massive to dodge, too strange to understand, tore through the fence lines and latched onto David's vessel, sending tendrils of black metal into the hull. The walls shook, the lights flickered, and the cold began to creep in. But David did not panic. He led his crew to the breach, weapons drawn, hearts steady, ready to meet death if it came through that door. From the tendrils came no monsters, only a figure tall and smooth silver, like a statue walking without sound, glowing with power. It looked at them not with eyes, but with presence, and then it spoke inside them again. "You are not meant to fight us." David answered not with voice, but with fire, throwing the first strike, a beam of light straight into the creature's chest. The others followed, weapons lighting up the corridor, filling it with heat and motion. The figure did not scream. It only bent, twisted, then collapsed into light that vanished into floor. More would come, they all knew it, so David gave a command not to retreat, not to hide, but to strike at the heart of the storm, to go to the center of the enemy fleet, and make them see, make them bleed. His ship roared to the lines, engines burning brighter than any star, weaving between ships, dodging death again and again, until they reached the center ship, not like the others, floating with no movement, no threat, but full of power, something ancient asleep waiting. They landed without resistance, stepped into the silence, weapons ready but unsure, and found a room at the core vast and glowing with strange symbols, with a single being floating in the center, motionless, ageless, neither alive nor dead. It opened its eyes, and David knew this was not a leader, not a warrior, but something worse of mind that had seen too much, that had shaped empires with thoughts, that had ended worlds with dreams. It looked at him not with anger, but with interest, like a child watching fire for the first time. And then it asked why he fought, why he resisted, what made him different. David answered with truth, not rage, not pride, just truth. He was not made for war. He had not been trained for glory. He had been broken, lost, and left to die. But he had survived, and in survival, he had found purpose, found strength, found others who would not kneel. The being paused and closed its eyes again and whispered something none of them could understand, and everything began to shake, to shift the space around them, the stars themselves, as if something deep had awakened, something buried now rising. David turned to his team, gave the signal, and they placed the charges around the chamber, this time not to destroy, but to mark the moment, to burn into the galaxy a sign that humanity had stood here, had faced the architects, and walked away alive. As they escaped, the chamber pulsed with light, and the enemy's ships began pull back, not in fear, but in thought, as if confused, as if unsure of what they had seen in this one man, in this one crew. The war was not over, not yet, but something had changed, something had broken, something had begun. And David, now known across systems and stories by names both holy and feared, stood ready to take the next step. The stars were still silent, but the silence now felt different, not like peace, but like waiting, like the calm before something bigger, something older than war or hope. David stood on the command deck, eyes locked on the readings from deep space signals flickering across the screen, signals that were not weapons, not threats, not calls to surrender, but something else, something alive, something watching. The team around him worked without speaking, each of them carrying the weight of what they had seen, what they had survived, what they had become in the fire battle. They were no longer just soldiers. They were witnesses to something the galaxy had never expected. Across the system, other human ships moved carefully, gathering wreckage, scanning the fields, marking the places where friends had fallen and enemies had vanished, not in defeat, but in thought, as if they had seen something in David, something that made them pause. Then came the signal. A pulse through space, pure and strange, vibrating through metal and bone, like a single thought stretched across light years. It reached every ship, every mind, every system that had touched war. "We see you." Those three words burned into every screen, etched into every mind, not a threat, not a command, but a truth that echoed like thunder across the void. David stepped back, reading the words again and again, feeling the weight of them not from fear, but from knowing that they had been noticed, not as insects, not as children, but as something worthy. He called a meeting, gathering his team, the captains of allied ships, the scientists and strategists, the ones who had studied the enemy and feared they would never understand them, and he shared the message. Some believed it was a warning, others believed it was an invitation. But David said it was a challenge not to fight, but to rise, to be more than what they had been, to become something the stars could not ignore. They began to build. Not weapons, not bombs, but beacons, towers of thought and memory, sending signals not in language, but in story, the story of Earth, the story of war, the story of man, who was not special until the enemy made their first mistake. The towers rose across moons and empty worlds, glowing with energy, singing into space, broadcasting what it meant to be human, not just the pain, but the art, the laughter, the defiance, the love. And from the dark, something answered, not with sound, but with presence, a ship unlike anything seen before, vast and quiet, shaped like a question, like a dream. It entered orbit, without force, without demand, and waited. David went alone. No weapons, no army, just a translator, a heartbeat, and the memory of what he had seen deep inside the enemy core. The ship opened like a flower unfolding with silence, inviting him inside a corridor lit by no light, yet glowing with meaning. Each step forward felt like walking through memory, through time, to the weight of all that had come before. At the center, a chamber waited with a single being, not metal, not flesh, something between, watching him with eyes that were not eyes, just presence and thought. "Why did you not break?" The question struck him like thunder, not from hate, but from wonder, and he answered, "Because we lose, because we fall, because we die, but we get up again, and again and again." The being studied him, and in that moment he saw flashes of what they were, creatures born not of planets, but storms raised and thought fed by stars ancient and tired from too much knowing. "You are small, yet you shake the sky." David said, "Maybe being small means we see things that giants forget. Maybe we care in ways they do not." The being moved not closer, but deeper into itself, like folding into a question. And then a single shape formed, a gift, not of metal, not of fire, but a memory, a crystal of light, and thought given without price. "This holds the door." David took it, not knowing what it meant, but feeling its weight like the future press into his hand. He left the ship, and the ship left him rising back into stars, without war, without noise, like a dream fading into morning. Back on Earth, and every colony across the stars of crystal was studied, shared, and finally understood. It was not a weapon. It was a path, a map, to something bigger, a network of minds, a place between worlds where thought lived and time bent. The door was open. David stood before the council leaders from every system, every background, every war, and said, "We are not ready, but we cannot wait, because they are watching and the sky has changed, and we must change with it." And so the journey began. Not a conquest, not a fear, but of seeking to learn, to understand, to grow beyond what they were to become, not just survivors, but something more. The stars no longer looked distant. They looked like pages waiting to be read. And David, now known across worlds as the one who spoke with the silence, prepared to take the first step through the door into the unknown.